Hi there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Recently, one of our fans, Amir Shahen, requested that we do a video that covered a what-if scenario in which Jango Fett survives the events of Petranaki Arena and then basically lives throughout the Clone Wars. Considering the fact that Jango Fett is most famous for his role as the progenitor of the entire clone army, this makes this particular what-if scenario especially juicy. So let's take a look at what happens. Also, if you guys want your video ideas to reach me, like or follow us on Facebook and send me a message. So let's go back to that fateful day in Petranaki Arena when Mace Windu basically Leroy Jenkins himself right into a massive trap. Jango Fett at the time served as Count Dooku's bodyguard. Most Sith Lords who hold public office like Palpatine and Dooku prefer to keep their red lightsabers and Sith lightning hidden away, and so they have guys like Jango Fett protecting them. Jango Fett is a seasoned warrior and a former member of the true Mandalorian outfit. Like any Mandalorian warrior worth his Beskar, Jango's armor is outfitted with a variety of tools and weapons that are specifically designed to give him an edge over enemy combatants. While normal people don't stand much of a chance against a Jedi one-on-one, Jango Fett has killed several Jedi already in his own career. He's even killed a few with his bare hands. But this time around, Jango Fett wasn't just facing a bunch of scrubs, he was facing Mace Windu, Jedi Master and perhaps the best duelist in the entire Jedi Order. Jango catches Mace Windu off guard with his gauntlet flamethrower. Weapons like this have been carefully designed by Mandalorians specifically to counter the Jedi's special skills. The other very important piece of kit Jango Fett has is a jetpack. It basically negates a Jedi's superhuman speed and strength and allows Mandalorian to keep himself out of melee range. Unfortunately, Jango Fett's jetpack had been damaged earlier while he was rolling around the mat with a reek. And so when Mace Windu presses Jango Fett, the bounty hunter tries to fly away from him, but his jetpack misfires and off with his head. In our scenario, it doesn't happen quite this way. Jango Fett manages to get his jetpack working and he flies back up to Count Dooku where he can better reassess the situation. When Yoda and his clones appear over the arena in dropships, Jango Fett retreats with Count Dooku and most likely would find his own way towards his Slave 1 ship and make it off-world. Now, Jango Fett is kind of in a tricky position here. I mean, he was never really supposed to be exposed to the Republic. If it weren't for Obi-Wan Kenobi accidentally stumbling upon Kamino and then chasing Jango Fett to Geonosis, the Republic would have never known that Jango Fett was working for both the Kaminoans and Count Dooku as well. This should have immediately set off alarms in the Republic Senate and probably could have even blocked the approval of the clone army. I mean, there's only one degree of separation, which is Jango Fett, between the leader of the Separatist Alliance and the Kaminoan cloners. If I were Dooku or Palpatine, I'd probably end up killing Jango Fett just to tie up loose ends. Mace Windu, in hindsight, was probably a bit too rash and should have tried to capture the bounty hunter for questioning rather than just kill him. Just imagine the confusion Mace Windu would have when he took off Jango Fett's helmet and then realized that Jango Fett and all the clones looked exactly the same. It would definitely raise some new questions. But then again, there are also reasons why Count Dooku might choose to keep Jango Fett, because Jango Fett is really the key to finding every weakness in the clone army. You see, not only did Jango Fett volunteer genetic material for the job, he also was responsible for hiring a good portion of the trainers who raise and teach these clones how to fight like warriors. The majority of these trainers were actually Mandalorian, and they would even instill some of their Mando culture on the clones. Jango Fett would personally take on the role of training the Alpha Class Advanced Recon Commandos, who were considered some of the deadliest warriors in the entire GAR. It's not that far-fetched to say that Jango Fett was one of the major architects of the clone army and how it's trained and how it would be deployed. While the Kaminoans were expert cloners in Geonosis, Jango Fett was the one who had military experience and had already previously trained an entire army of Mandalorians. On top of that, Jango Fett's DNA is inside each and every one of those clones, so I would argue that Jango Fett is probably more knowledgeable about the clone army than any person alive in the galaxy. Now, we have to remember that Count Dooku didn't want to completely dominate the Republic. He most likely could have destroyed the GAR and the Republic government very early on in the war because of the massive imbalance in forces. But still, defeating the Republic is not the same as actually occupying the Republic and taking it over. That requires a lot more manpower and resources and a lot more political skill, which I don't think Count Dooku and his Separatist droids really had available at the time. What Chancellor Palpatine wanted was to use the Separatist cause to bolster his own power in the executive position. And so the whole point of the war was to generate real threats that would push the Republic Senate towards more extreme legislation and give more emergency powers to Palpatine. One thing that the Separatist Alliance tried to do very early on was to create a virus that specifically targeted only the Fett genome and kept pretty much everyone else safe. Now, having the source DNA from Jango Fett might give them a much more accurate representation of what the clone's DNA looks like, and this might even help them create some kind of plague or virus. Although I really doubt that Jango Fett would agree to something like this. While Jango Fett never shows much affection towards any of the clones aside from his clone son Boba Fett, I believe that he is a bounty hunter and ultimately a survivor of very extreme circumstances, would never allow someone to use his own body against him and create something that might endanger him, even if the price is right. Not much is known about why Jango Fett agrees to the Prime Clone program. It could be the ridiculous amount of money he's getting paid, but then again, the bounty hunter never seems to be interested in material wealth, beyond having some of the finest gear and ships available for bounty hunting, of course. As a matter of fact, the only request Jango Fett makes after agreeing to the project is that he wanted an unaltered clone, Boba Fett. The reason Jango Fett wants this is because he wants to preserve the legacy of his own father figure, Yaster Muriel, who had started the True Mandalorian movement and the Super Commando Codex. The other, perhaps even more important reason why Jango Fett wants to help Count Dooku is the fact that he really hates Jedi. Years earlier at the Battle of Galadron, Jango Fett and his true Mandalorians are tricked into a battle against the Jedi by the Death Watch faction. Dooku had been the Jedi Master in charge of the mission, and the battle between these two sides was horrific and resulted in the death of every Mandalorian except for Jango Fett and many Jedi as well. Fett would be sold off to slavers and would just wallow in misery for the next few years before he escaped. I think this event ultimately broke Jango Fett and made him the ruthless mercenary that he is now. So while Jango Fett might not do anything to deliberately hurt himself, like a virus, I can definitely see him getting involved with Separatist Special Forces because he looks and sounds like a clone trooper. Jango Fett could be the ultimate commando behind enemy lines. Moreover, the Separatist High Command could use Jango Fett as a propaganda tool as well. I imagine it would be extremely demoralizing for the clones in the Republic to realize that their progenitor was fighting against them on the other side. Now, some clone troopers would actually develop a very negative view of Jango Fett and Mandalorian specifically throughout the Clone Wars, and that was because they would encounter Mandalorian mercenary groups and, take really high casualties because Mandalorian commandos are kind of crazy and very hard to defeat. Now, on the other hand, you had clones like the Republic clone commandos who grew closer to the Mandalorian heritage and had a more negative view about the Republic and especially the Jedi. This was especially true earlier on in the war when Jedi officers would just lead their clone troopers in these suicidal frontal charges into heavily fortified enemy positions. This is essentially one of the quickest ways an officer can really destroy their own reputation and make their men want to kill them. Jango Fett could focus on recruiting a lot of these disaffected clone troopers and basically start a Separatist Alliance clone trooper unit that could be used for infiltration missions and other kind of behind enemy lines shenanigans. If the Separatists were to unleash Fett in this way, it would lead to some real chaos in the Republic and even force Palpatine to alter the clone template earlier than he wanted to. I mean, eventually Palpatine would come to the realization on his own that the clone template using just one individual has some pretty big vulnerabilities. So what we might actually see happen here is Palpatine might switch to a conscript or volunteer army made up with Republic citizens before the Empire has even started. Now, Jango Fett somehow survives the entire war. I imagine he'll really like having a front seat or even partaking in Order 66, the mass slaughter of his hated Jedi. It's also possible that throughout the 4 years of the war, Jango Fett would have a change of heart about his role as the prime clone for the JAR. Perhaps he would become sick of seeing what essentially are copies of himself getting fed into a giant meat grinder. He could position himself as a savior of all clones, and that would lead to mass desertion within the JAR. Although judging by how friendly Boba Fett was to the Empire and how he ultimately helped the Empire put down a clone rebellion on Kamino, it's very possible that the Fetts will always view the clone troopers with disdain. I think even Jango Fett was unprepared for the mass cloning of his genetic material, and I think it's hard for him to deal with the fact that there's so many people running around that look just like him. I mean, he probably does feel some sense of responsibility, but he just lies to himself by saying, hey, these Kaminoan clone troopers are conditioned to be more loyal and less aggressive, so it's not me at all. But I think that's kind of, nonsense. But let me know in the comment section below what you think about our what-if scenario. It definitely would have been cool seeing Jango Fett kind of deal with this whole, loyalty issue. You have the Republic and the Clone Troopers, and then your, people who are payrolling you, which are the Sith and the Separatists. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.